It's the Center Fantasy Football Podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal!
Yes! Yes! Yes, this is my favorite part of the game.
Analyzing all of the league matchups week to week.
You can't win!
Get him a body bag! Finish him!
It is a bit above average.
I said this sucks, and basically so do you.
And discussing the boom, bust, and hidden gem players throughout the league.
We ain't found shit!
What the hell is Brett Favre doing here?
I'm in town to play the Dolphins, you dumbass.
Dan Marino should die of gonorrhea and rot in hell. Laces out.
Touchdown!
And here's your host,
Allow myself to introduce myself.
David Harbatkin.
Hello and welcome to the Center Fantasy Football Podcast for Week 6 of Season 5. It's the All-Commissioner edition, as we are joined by both the current and former commissioners of the Center Fantasy Football League. So, with that, Mr. Nick Zaveri, welcome back to the program.
It has been, I have not, wow, since our political podcast, I have not actually graced the airways, the digital airways with my stilted tone, so it is great to be back, and I come obviously on a bit of an upswing in fantasy after losing Q in week 1, so I am so glad to be here.
I'm sure you are. And we also have the current commissioner, Mr. Gazelutsky, as
win or lose, I'm on every week.
Exactly. I was hoping to get Dr. Hockey and the Millennials on this program, and maybe they'll still call in. But in the meantime, haven't heard anything from them. But they have that huge battle for the basement tonight, or this week, which we will certainly get into. But before we get into any of that, let's go over last week's games. I don't know, where do you guys want to start? I guess old commissioner's choice.
Commissioner's choice.
Nick,
Well,
you want to start with your game?
your biggest blowout of the week.
Yeah, we'll start with the biggest blowout of the week, the most ridiculous game, 167.24 to 81.72. Nicky Baby defeats the special team of the Whalers who has stolen his trademark helmet. So first of all, Whalers had a bunch of guys on bye this week. He had Drew Brees on a bye. He had Michael Thomas, Demaryius Thomas on a bye. So it was a difficult week for him. Anyway, he picked up Andy Dalton. But it wouldn't have mattered, I don't think, because you, first of all, had the high score in the league. And it was just an utter domination. I mean, just all around. And, by the way, you got 167 points with Henry getting only 0.9 points as your running back. And you had everybody on a bye except for Crabtree, who had 20.2 points. So, I mean, thorough domination in this game. Aaron Rodgers with 30 points. He's been amazing this season. I think your one post about fantasy referenced him. Deshaun Jackson finally showing up with 15 points. 20 points for Will Fuller, who you picked up out of nowhere, which is ridiculous. Fournette with 31.4 points. And then, as I mentioned, 0.9 from Henry. Your tight end also only got 3.5 points. 25 points from Adams after getting his head nearly taken off the week before. Comes back to score ridiculous amounts of points. 12 from your kicker. And the secret weapon, I think, to your entire season so far, the Jacksonville defense with 28 points. Just ridiculous. For Whalers, 17 for Dalton, 6.9 for Brown, 4.1 from Alan Hearns, some leftover garbage from Geese. Only 14.2 from Ezekiel Elliott, who Geese still, I'm sure you can renew your objection. 6.3.
Yes, unfortunately, Whalers learned just how bad Blake Bortles was.
Yeah.
So they got rid of Hearns.
6.3 from Latavius Murray, who looked to, initially the reports were that he was going to be the guy in Minnesota to replace Dalvin Cook, but it turns out it was McKinnon instead. Witten pulled out of the garbage can from you as well to get 12 points.
We're cast off.
Yep. 2.8 from Carlos Hyde, 13 from his kicker, and 5 from the Pittsburgh defense. All right. So I guess your thoughts on this game. I guess, Nick, we'll start with you since this is your team.
Yeah, Fuller lives under the radar because obviously with Houston, talk receiver-wise is predominantly around DeAndre Hopkins. Fuller obviously being a second-year player. Houston finally has a quarterback. One of my regrets in that draft was not, and I liked Watson coming out of college out of Clemson. So I'm not at all surprised that he's done this well, and I think Fuller's just going to be a good recipient of that going forward. I only got the idea of picking up Will Fuller from a friend of mine in another league who just mentioned his name in passing, and I was like, oh shit, what is going on with him this year? And then surprisingly, Fuller was available. Fournette's just doing well. It's a good Jacksonville team. Before we got on the show, I mentioned to you, talking about the fact that if Jacksonville had anything remotely resembling a quality quarterback, they're a playoff team for sure. Derrick Henry, that's just a bust. Like there's nothing to be done there. Jared Cook, I think, had a fumble in that game against Baltimore. Definitely not living up to his potential, but it is what it is. And Devontae Adams with a nice comeback this week. Bottom line, Green Bay receivers other than Jordy Nelson seem to be showing up weekly. The Jacksonville defense is legit. They, with the exception of that weird game against Tennessee in week 2 or week 3, they play extremely well. And I mean, that might be the second coming of the Legion of Boom, coming out of Jacksonville, which is the biggest surprise. And I think you mentioned a good point about Scott's team. There's a lot of guys. I mean, if you're talking about Andy Dalton, you probably are going to take an L to begin with. But then just looking down the rest of the roster, it's rough. It's absolutely rough. But I thought coming into the season that aside from Rodgers and maybe getting some luck from players like Michael Crabtree, my team was okay. But Fournette's been surprised, and the Jacksonville defense has been definitely the surprise. As far as Crabtree goes, 20 points on the bench, and I had no desire to start him. I don't think Baltimore's that great at defense, but it's E.J. Manuel, and so I don't know what to make of that. And they're Oakland season stuff on the brink, so they're bringing Derek Carr back this weekend. So very likely, Crabtree it's best to have to start again against the now Los Angeles Chargers. So I think it's a combination of going against a team with a lot of guys on bye. Although to be fair, so did I. I mean, Denver and Washington, they were both off this week. So Emmanuel Sanders, Jordan Reed, Terrell Pryor. I couldn't really activate. Same thing with Mark Ingram. Just pretty much my entire bench was on a bye. So I would say I lucked out, but I think there's just been a couple of trends on teams of area that seem to be pointing upward. So a good win, but definitely taking advantage of an opponent that it was working with not at full strength, to say the least.
Well, I also think, and I've been commenting on your team for the last few weeks about how you've, I don't understand how you win. I mean, you've been sneaking out. I mean, you beat Dr. Hockey by, I think, 7 points at the end. And the hockey is horrible. Mm-hmm. So this is the first, statement game that I've seen from you where it's okay, maybe he is really good. Where everybody just showed up. I'm wondering if it's a blip or, I mean, because this isn't even your normal team. Everybody else in a bye, but does this make you readjust kind of your lineup based on these new guys that you've put in there for this week?
I think the big question for me. The question is just at wide receiver. I took Terrell Pryor, in the auction. Got Emmanuel Sanders, obviously Deshaun Jackson, which has been talked about previously, just a late pick in the auction, and definitely spent way too much money on him. There's just a cabinet of wide receivers to choose from, which I was hoping eventually will become trade bait, but I haven't really looked at too many trade opportunities with them. And I'm looking right now at the previous week against LeVar, the the dynasty, so to speak. But yeah, I hesitate to say that we're legit. I mean, as I say all the time, like the goal is to get to the playoffs. So you get to, you know, 7, 8 wins, and then you have a decent shot at getting to the postseason. But I think, you know, Fournette seems pretty consistent. Rodgers, obviously, I think, is the team in Green Bay. They don't even pretend to run the ball at this point. And there's a good enough group of wide receivers that someone's going to break out every week. And, yeah, I think the Jacksonville defense just keeps putting me over the edge. I mean, I'm looking at the difference with LeVar. Yeah, Jacksonville put up, 14 points to, only 2 points from LeVar's defense, which was Miami. So, and the difference there was a difference of 20 points. So, yeah, opportunities like that keep coming up. That same week, Fournette had 24 points. I mean, it's an incredible start of the season to the rookie from Jacksonville. Then I look at week 3 against Auckland. And just sneaking out with that one. Part of that was just Rodgers having a great second half against Cincinnati. They were getting blown out, and I think that might have been the week I put up that message on Facebook about if Rodgers is behind and my opponent has a lead, it's not going to be a safe one because it's just too likely that Rodgers is going to just put up numbers like he did against Dallas last week. But yeah, I mean that week Denver I had started throwing 3 points. On the bench was I left Deshaun Jackson with 18 points that week. Even Jacksonville that week had 12 points. So yeah, to your point, Jacksonville's a pretty consistent play for me, I think. And then of course week 2, which is the first game of the year I won against Gayton. Crabtree that week had 3 touchdowns against the Jets. So that's kind of what propelled me. And that same week, that was the week Jacksonville stunk it up against Tennessee. They had 0 points actually on defense. And on the bench, I had Devontae Adams and Emmanuel Sanders who combined for 47 points. So once again, the receivers are clearly there. So I would say I'm sort of slightly above sort of middle of the road team. I think this team has a chance of averaging at least 100 points a week, which I think to have any chance in this league, obviously that's kind of got to be in place. And at 4 wins, I'm a few wins away from getting to a very legit conversation about getting to the playoffs. I'm not looking at the standings, but what I'd be curious about is how many teams at this point are basically out, and then you look at what's left essentially as contenders, and then see really where it goes. But yeah, having a lead right now, I think it makes all the difference. Obviously, in terms of playoff standings, and possibly to get my first bye in the playoffs, which I haven't had in this league's history.
Yeah, I mean, and we can certainly, in between the review of last week's game and next week's game, look at the standings and because there are certainly teams now that are on the bubble, and there's a clear delineation of all this stuff. But Geese, your thoughts on this game and Nick's team, or anything on Whalers?
What's the answer? Lost me in an hour analysis. I think he pretty much covered the whole season. Maybe. I think he's covered everything. I don't know. It sounds a little like that scene in Old School where Farrell had that blackout moment and then just kind of ends the debate with oh my God, James Crumble.
Well,
no, Nick more than thoroughly uncovered anything I could possibly go over.
All right, well then let's move on to the next game, which is your game. The Hackettstown Hagglers on a winning streak now, defeating Nick and Jamie 115.34 to 104.42. This game, first of all, considering that Nick and Jamie had no running backs in this game and their tight end got 0 points, it was a bit of a squeaker. I mean, you were clearly favored in this game, I thought, but it ended up being much closer than I thought it would be, and it looked for a little while like you were going to have to rely on Diggs to get you over the hump at the end of the Sunday games, which would have been a precarious situation, being that he only got 1.4 points because he got the injury to his groin.
And Sam Bradford looked horrible on that Monday night game. But it wasn't even necessary because, as Nick mentioned, Deshaun Watson-Yaios gets 45.5 points in the loss to KC. I mean, he's just been ridiculous. He's kind of transformed your whole team, along with everything else. I also think that Diggs going down with only 1.4 points probably gave Lombardi a little bit of an orgasm for his little argument. He probably was like, yes. But meanwhile, Doug Martin came in with 15.2 points, um, which was, a really good showing in his first game. But I mean, I guess if we're doing the aggregate of the points, well, then Le'Veon Bell had a slight edge. But nonetheless, this was enough for both of you to pull out wins. So you get 45 from Watson, 18 from Bunches of Funches, only 8 from Humphreys, 15 from Doug Martin. As I mentioned, only 6.6 from McKissick. I think he's McKissicked his job goodbye on the Hagglers. And then 2.2 from Watson, from the other Watson, Ben Watson, yes. 1.4 from Diggs, and 10 from your kicker, and 8 from the Buffalo defense. For Nick and Jamie, I mean, this really came down to them having a bad, Tom Brady having a bad game on the Thursday night game, only had 15.62 points. I mean, Gronkowski was out. I mean, we've mentioned this a bunch of times on the program, but they're essentially a three-player team, and one of them was gone, and Brady had a bad game. So you knew that they were going to be in trouble. Antonio Brown did do his part. He got 25.7 points, but then Alshon Jeffrey with only 6.1. And they picked up Jones from Green Bay, who got 20.4. But other than that, I mean, 5.4 from Collins, 0 from their tight ends, we mentioned, 6.1 from Rashard Matthews. 9 from Boswell, and actually 16 from their defense, the Seattle defense, which they've been getting a decent amount of points lately too. So, I mean, ultimately, I know that you've made some moves on this team post this game, but you get the win, you keep rolling, and Deshaun Watson is a beast. So, what are your thoughts on your own game here?
We'll get to Deshaun Watson in a moment. We'd like to start out with Nick and Jamie's running back core at the beginning of the week as opposed to what happened, who they actually played. Now, they had Prosite from Seahawks and Jean-Luc Richard of Starship Enterprise. That was their two starting running backs. Okay? And then, surprise, surprise, I overlooked this team because they start off Alex Collins, who is a decent running back in Oakland. They just bring him out and sit him on the sidelines for the goal line, thank God. And then Jones was a happy pickup out of nowhere, as you can see, getting 20 points. Had me a little bit nervous there, Bob. I don't know what's going on over there. But Nick and Jamie, for all intents and purposes, they're running a three-man unit. They're three-manning it this year with Tom Brady, Gronkowski, and, of course, Antonio Brown. And when Gronk's back, they're basically two-manning it. And then when Brady, crapped the bed, then they just decided to go with Antonio Brown this week. And it's tough. It's tough for Antonio Brown to beat the whole team, and you can see it almost good. And on the other side of the ball, what can we say about Watson? I mean, the guy, he's a machine. He's animal. He just gets 5 touchdowns every single time. And I was really, in the first half, he was horrid. Okay, he had nothing. In the second half, I was talking to you during the game. Nayo. Keep saying it over and over again. The guy's amazing. All right, McKissick, his season's by. He's gone. He's not even on the bench. He's a guy. All right, and there's only room for one Yayos in the team. So Ben Watson, Yayos is out of there. And then Diggs with the groin injury was disturbing, but turns out it wasn't even necessary thanks to Yayos. So when you have Randy Watson Yayos in the game, you're always in it.
Yep, Nick, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, it's interesting. Coming out of the auction, I like Nick and Jamie's team a lot because I thought Brady and Gronkowski, it's New England. You assume, obviously good things, and then Antonio Brown, because you come out of an auction hopefully with one or two guys who are going to be just a given for 20, possibly more points a week. And they came out of the auction with 3 that I thought were just a given. I actually have Gronkowski in another league. I wasn't paying attention to the news. I didn't know he was injured, so I wasn't quite sure how the fuck he put up a donut. But yeah, I agree with Dave's point. I think, for a 3-headed monster to probably be essentially, one in like a third of a month. There is a huge letdown. And the rest of the team, it was a great surprise from Jones and Green Bay. And I just criticized Green Bay's lack of a rushing attack earlier. But the rest of the team is just not good. And I'm looking at at the bench, and I'm a Raider. I obviously pay attention to the Raiders. Richard is just too boomer bust at this point, and more bust than anything else with a running game that's still kind of struggling. And the rest, I don't see where they're going to get their points from. And they might well. I mean, they're 2-3, so they're clearly still in it to some extent, but. They're probably one of the biggest surprises for me because I would have assumed if I'm talking about teams being 4-1, I'm not probably thinking about our team. I'm thinking more about Nick and Jamie. And 2-3 puts them in a tough situation at the far end, being ninth in the league right now. But there's just not enough talent here. And now it's a question of Gronkowski being hurt this early, and he goes into a game against the Jets this weekend, which I think he should return to form pretty well. Same thing with Brady. But it's just, there's just no depth here. And I think, coming out of the auction, that's hopefully what you try to do is just pick up these guys. Again, if Jones can be a constant, that may turn the tide of the team significantly, but hard to say. Green Bay running backs are just too inconsistent. That's a question of how well, they are a member of the passing game. So as far as Gaze's team, Watson, like Fournette, is in the running of Rookie of the Year. I think the passing game for Houston, we talked about Will Fuller earlier, is just incredible. And I think Deshaun Watson, I liked him out of college. I think he's going to be a solid quarterback for Houston. So 25 points is a bit extreme, but I'm not shocked by that. And they did it against a tough KC defense. Devin Funch is obviously taken up for the role of Kelvin Benjamin in Carolina. So it's not a surprise there. But Funch I think came out of that out of the 2015 draft, I think. We're seeing some possibilities there. Doug Martin, again, I was critical of the trade, obviously the game that involving Le'Veon Bell. But Martin clearly showed up in a tough game against New England. The rest of the way, there are some questions about depth I would also have about the Haglers, but I think Watson can average 30 points a week. I think that's a huge advantage going the rest of the way. And I think Stephon Diggs, will keep getting better. He's definitely one of the more underrated receivers in the league, and I think Minnesota runs a good enough offense to just keep making him a viable threat. So it's a great win. It's a must win. I mean, he put Gabe at 3-2, and still very much in the running. So it's more of it's tough to say it's not necessarily a sort of, is it like just Nick and James' team just lacking depth, or is it just that the Haglers are actually are fairly legit? And I think 50-50 on that, but I think Watson, again, 45 has been an anomaly, but I think Deshaun Watson is going to end up being one of the probably top 10 in points scored this year for a quarterback in fantasy. So I think that's one of the picks of the year so far.
I mean, and he had 42 the week before, so it's started not being an anomaly. I mean, he got 26 against New England the week before that. And I think that, we've talked about this on the program and certainly before that, but Geese, in terms of depth for the Haglers, they don't really care because they're almost streaming a team other than Watson. So, it's plug and play over there, and I think that they're doing enough to plug and play it, and then they have, with Watson as the focal point, and then you add in some of these other players. You put in Martin, who's fine, and you put in Diggs when he's healthy. I mean, the question about Diggs, I'd really say, is more a question of Bradford. I mean, because Bradford looked horrible in that first half, though he did get a few passes to Thalian, which we could talk about when we get to my game. But he just looked terrible, and then Keenum came in, and he looked good again, or at least good enough to win that game. I don't know about necessarily fantasy points, but he was getting it to Thalian a little bit, and he was getting it to Kyle Rudolph and stuff. So I mean,
the injury to Dalvin Cook also affects it. So the Minnesota team is in flux at this point in a way that it wasn't in the week prior. But I mean, there's still a good base there for the Hagglers, and then just keep adding people. I mean, I know that you go until your eyes bleed until on Tuesday nights and whatever else it might be to almost stream a team. But you seem to be doing well with it, and as long as you have Watson sitting there still getting his points, like it's possible to string together some wins like this.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you look at most of our additions on the on the transaction sheet, most of them occur between 4 and 5 a.m. in the morning. So I'm that man. I'm up all hours of the night. Number two, I believe we're the only team in the league that has 0 players from the auction currently on the team. Another bad man move.
Is that true? Oh my God, that's true.
So no one is safe on the team if you take a closer look.
well, Coleman. Didn't you have Coleman and Cup from the auction? I mean, you certainly have
We have
nobody.
Coleman? I don't even know. Maybe. Don't worry. He's on the chopping block.
So yeah. All right. So, well, I think that's enough for this game. Speaking of teams that are streaming full teams, let's go to Dr. Hockey and House Targaryen. Now, he's been streaming his team, but horrifically. Um, now, now, this was actually a game that he almost pulled out. The Lightning Rods ended up winning 122 to 106, and I was watching the Monday night game, and he had a lead. So going into the Monday night game, he had like less than a point lead. So he needed like he needed just to be shut down. He needed the Minnesota or he needed Rudolph to be shut down completely. And he was in the first half up until when Case Keenum came in and then ended up getting him 16.5 points. But prior to that, had Sam Bradford stayed in there, he could have narrowly held on to a 1-point win. But yeah, I mean, he continues to just be terrible. I mean, I just don't know what to say. I mean, 36 points from Wentz, so he finally gets that. But other than that, I mean, 9.8 from Golden Tate, 6.5 from Richardson, 17 from Duke Johnson, which was a good pickup, 15 from Ellington, who was also a good pickup. So he has some pieces in there, but then 5.1 from Clay, 0 from Ingram, and that's his flex. He plays 2 tight ends at flex. I mean, had this been the week where he played Marshawn Lynch, it could have been a closer game. I mean, you add, would he have won 12 points plus? No, he wouldn't have won. So, it's just, oh my God, I just don't even, uh, it's tough, Rock. I mean, and this was his best game of the season. I mean, I think this was his first game over 106 points. So, I mean, over 100 points. So, this is the best he's gotten. He almost pulled out a win, but he just couldn't, at the end. For the Lightning Rods, they've been up and down as well. I mean, they also had that 59-point game against me, but then they come back and then they occasionally, they're very inconsistent. So they get 32 from Newton, who seems to be getting better. Tyreek Hill was 16.8, who he hasn't had the consistency, but when he plays well, he does play well. Finally plays Des Bryant. And sitting the other Bryant in the Martavius Bryant. Did he get rid of him? Oh no, he didn't. He didn't sit him. I'm sorry. He played him at the flex with only 8.4 points. 7.9 from Jay Ajayi, who sucks. Mixon 11 points, which that's his best game. Which, whatever. And then, like I said, Kyle Rudolph with 16, and Gostkowski with 15 and negative 2 points from the Houston defense. I mean, blah. I don't. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, hockey now at 0-5 basically has to almost win out at this point. I mean, he has maybe 1 or 2 losses that he could. I'd venture to say one more loss, and he's done because in this league generally historically I think there's only been one team that made the playoffs with a 6-7 record, and that was I think the Lightning Rods, but they had an immense amount of points, and hockey doesn't even have any points. So I mean, he's got a very short rope here.
For the Lightning Rods, I mean, it's an important win. I mean, they're 3-2, which is shocking to me because I mean, just with how up and down they've been. But I mean, I guess when they've been up, they've been fine and enough to get a win. But I mean, I don't know. What are your? I mean, every time I seem to say something about a team being not that great or anything else, then they come out and with a totally revamped lineup and they have a good team. So I don't know. But do you see that happening for the Lightning Rods, or do you just see like, oh, they played, the House Targaryen? And do you see any hope for House Targaryen? Either of you can take this. Nick?
I guess I'll jump on the Lightning Rods if Gaza wants to talk about Alwyn's team. I mean, I'm looking at the roster now, and obviously, Joe Mixon. I think Leonard Fournette having the season. I think people assumed Joe Mixon would have, being theoretically the better back coming out of the draft. But I think Cincinnati we're seeing very clearly Cincinnati is just not a good team anymore, and those early round exits in the playoffs not even going to show up now for the Bengals. Looking at obviously Des Bryant was on a bye last week, coming up swinging on a bye. I don't see Marcus Mariota has also been very surprising. He's obviously injured. I think people put Mariota up as being one of the surprise quarterbacks in fantasy this year that we're just not seeing materialize. Cam Newton still very up and down. So I mean, we can see possibly some promise. I think he had a good week last week. Tyreek Hill, I agree with Dave about just being sort of up and down. Taylor Gabriel, Atlanta's just not as good as they were last year. JHI, another big surprise. I think Miami is just god awful. We all know Jay quarterback is a terrible quarterback. I don't even know who the fuck Elijah McGuire is for the Jets. The first one seeing his name, like, who is it? Kyle Rudolph. It's just, he's one of those guys. Like, I've heard the guy, but I just don't think there's much data left anymore. Martavis Bryant for Pittsburgh. Their offense seems not be as vertical right now. I think just Roethlisberger is kind of. It's so funny. Him and Eli, it's literally the same year we're seeing them both fall off a cliff. Probably the same with Phillip Rivers, I guess. So I agree. 3-2 is a little surprising for me, and it puts them certainly right in the thick of it. So we'll see. I don't think they're going to hold this up. I think they are, and they're very likely going to end up with maybe possibly 2 wins. I think they're going to be ending up the season with 5, which won't get them to the playoffs. I think they're just going to be, just sort of, and clearly on the outside looking in, but it's not a team I would be excited about.
Geese?
Well, at 0-4, we were looking at hockey schedule, and this was a team that, he was supposed to start to make a run. It looks like instead his team got the runs. And Carson Wentz was probably the quarterback he should have been playing the whole time. He finally put him in there and got some decent points, but the rest of the team, once again, is questionable. We're no longer carrying 3 tight ends and 3 quarterbacks and other coaching faux pas. He's starting to get a little better as a coach. Tate not producing. Richardson was interesting. It was boom or bust, and obviously was bust. Ellington was a great Nick and Jamie type of scouting move. Clay, again, he should have rotated a tight end in there. Playing the 2 tight end set, that's another bizarre coaching move by a coach. Ingram was 0 and Clay was 5, so I think 1 horrid tight end is all I would go with next week instead of 2. And then kicking game was all right, but this is Dr. Hockey is just a bizarre guy. Like this lineup will be totally scrapped. So he's doing what the Hagglers are doing, just not putting much thought into it, unfortunately. So that's unfortunately, my friend, that's the breakdown on that. So
And your thoughts on the Lightning Rods? Do you have any on them?
Lightning Rods, if it wasn't for Gillisley in week 1, could be talking about first place tie with everybody else. But Jay Ajayi, I agree. He's just him and Cutler are just Tweedledee and Tweedledum of the horrors this year. There's a horrid mix there. Speaking of mix, Joe Mixon is finally in the mix, getting 10 points. But, his team is, Newton. This is the Cam Newton show. So, he doesn't really make a lot of moves. I don't know how many, actual roster moves he's made here. Let's see. These teams, they just keep winning without making a lot of moves. And, I don't know, maybe making 35 moves is not the answer. He's made 5 moves. We have an identical record. I made 35. So, go figure that out.
Nick, you want to say anything about Dr. Hockey's team, since we love to pile on?
Where's House Targaryen? I mean, look, it's a great name. Unfortunately, it's not really doing much justice to a great house of Daenerys Stormborn. But
Meredith Thomas.
Well played. I don't see where these wins are going to come from. I was saying before, Jesse James? Who the fuck is Jesse James?
He saw him in week 1, picked him up, because week 1, Jesse James, I think he got a couple touchdowns. Yeah, he got 2 touchdowns, so he got 22 points. And then he's just been non-existent since then. But Hockey picked him up and is for some reason stashing him and holding out hope that, he's going to reemerge from that week 1. But I don't know.
Yeah, so, okay. So, coming out of the auction, you look at, I remember the bidding war for Julio Jones. And it's right, and it's rightly so. But after Julio Jones, I don't see who the big acquisition is on this team. I don't see where the next guy is going to step up and be like that big scorer for the team. I think Golden Tate is 3 years removed from helping Dave, just being in one of the upper echelons in the league. Carson Wentz, I think, is a stable quarterback, but he's not going to carry your team. And the rest of the way, am I missing? Did he lose someone for the rest of the season? Was there had to have been someone else he spent a lot of money on in the auction? I'm just not remembering this.
No. Just no.
I don't think so.
No.
No, okay, so he just blew his wad on Julio Jones. Okay, fair enough.
Marshawn Lynch kind of spent a lot of money on, who's been a bust. I don't know. DeMarco Murray? Didn't he spend money on Murray? I don't know.
I think DeMarco Murray, I do remember DeMarco Murray going for $40 or something. Which could still be good for a touchdown game. You're looking at possibly averaging maybe 10 or 12 points. So
you mean the entire House Targaryen team, 10 or 12 points? I'm sorry, what? I missed that.
No, Lynch at this point at best is sort of like a second running back for the team. But Duke Johnson, Andre Ellington, you're just not gonna get the points from there.
Johnson's actually been good.
What's that?
Duke Johnson has actually been one of his better pickups. He's actually been good. And Ellington was fine. He's slowly adding mid-Carter pieces into the lineup, but in week 4, I just don't. First of all, you see what I have to work with here, and it's not good. And then I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
So look what you just said. You're talking about 2 backup running backs as being decent pickups, right? This is what we've come to now in terms of talking about this team. I don't see where the wins are coming from, but I do agree. And when you talk this much shit about a team, that's usually when they end up biting you in the ass at some point. I just think it's gonna be a struggle. And at 0-5 now, you're looking at. Clearly, he's not going to go on an 8-game winning streak. So, what are we talking about? Maybe 3 wins this season? It's clearly not going to get him into the playoffs. So, it's very likely going to just catch someone off guard. A spoiler: some team that just has a bunch of guys on a bye, 1 week, and he managed to catch up to them.
I mean, he does. This is the only win that I'm predicting. Well, he may. We'll talk about his game this week coming up against the Millennials, which I know he definitely wants to win that because they've developed a huge rivalry between the two of them. But the one win that I think that he's going to get, he catches Nick and Jamie on the week that Brady, Gronk, and Antonio Brown are on a bye. So if he can't pull out that win,
there it is.
yeah,
there it is.
exactly. But other than that, I don't know. Okay, let's move on to the next game. I guess we'll just get my stupid game over with. I'm so aggravated by this game. And not even with my team. I actually performed reasonably well. I got out of the Thursday night. I played both Hogan and Amendola and got double digits for both of them. Carson Palmer was kind of a disappointment, but I mean, at that point, I really didn't have a. I mean, Roethlisberger was terrible, and Matthew Stafford has not been good either. And I kept Palmer on the bench, or I mean, kept him on the team, and he's going against Philadelphia, so I mean, whatever. But 17 points, fine. I mean, a lot of this for minor, by the way. So Winston gets 20 points, and Brait got 17 in the Thursday night game, and a lot of that was on one touchdown pass. Because for most of that game, Winston had like 8 points, and Brait had like almost nothing too. So it was looking really good. And then they got that combo meal, which really helped him. But then his team just went off ridiculously. So AJ Green with 29.9 points, 24 from T.Y. Hilton, 34 from Melvin Gordon, McCaffrey even with 14.8 points. And then Lacey did nothing. Suckup only got 5 and 6 from the Minnesota defense. For the 1603ers, I mean, like I said, so Palmer 17 points, Hogan 21, 15 from Amendola, Kareem Hunt with one of his worst games, but it's still 14 points. McCoy with 14 points. Kelsey ends up with 17.8 points in the first half, but then he goes out with the concussion. And Odell Beckham gets 21.5 points before going out for the season on that injury, which is, we could talk about the ramifications of that for this team, later on. And then Zerline, after getting 27 points the week before, gets only 4 and 2 from the Detroit defense. So, this was, I don't feel. I mean, the thing about Minor is the 2 week, the week that he beat me and the week that he beat Geese, he just had ridiculous games and ridiculous performances, especially by T.Y. Hilton on both of those weeks. But, and last week he was under 100. So he's hit or miss, and this was definitely a hit week for him. For the 1603ers, it was an okay performance, but it was just not enough to combat all that Black Ice Dynasty put out there. So, I don't know, disappointing loss. There goes the undefeated season. Not that I thought that I would get that, but I mean, what can you do? We caught him on a bad week. And I think the real question is, how much does the Beckham injury hurt this team going forward? I mean, there's still a bunch of stars on this team. And frankly, the first 2 weeks were won without Beckham also. So it's not like this team can't win without Beckham, but it is a blow. But I don't know. Thoughts on this game, Nick?
So, I was just looking at Chris Hogan for a minute. Sorry, hold on. Yeah, I do let that. I agree with you on the point. Sometimes you go up against an opponent that just everything is working. You can make that argument for me last week. Putting up 167 points. You're getting points from just places that it just seems absurd. I mean, AJ Green with almost 30 points. It's obviously a little hot for him. And again, I was talking about Cincinnati earlier not being that great a team this year. 20 points for Winston is definitely higher than his average. T.Y. Hilton is just not. And again, Andrew Luck hasn't stepped on the field yet. And you can't. Yeah, there's no way you would even assume that from someone like T.Y. Hilton. Melvin Gordon, I think, is legit. 34 points, good. 34 points, legit, no. But yeah, I'm not surprised by a good showing by Melvin Gordon. But yeah, down the road, I mean, then you've got Christian McCaffrey, and Brady from Tampa Bay. But yeah, I mean, just a lot of points early on from some of these guys. And again, points that I just normally wouldn't expect, especially from Winston, Green, and Hilton. And then you lined it up with Yeah, Carson Palmer basically having a Carson Palmer game. And yeah, I mean, it's just a little week where you guys just didn't show up that well. But still, listen, I mean, 129 points still wins you more games than not in the league. But LeVar had one of that weeks where, yeah, I mean, scoring someone 50, like someone went off that you probably didn't anticipate, and that's kind of where it is. And in terms of the bench, yeah, I mean, the bench doesn't do a whole bunch for you.
Yeah,
I tend to go along with that. It's cliche as it sounds. It's just one of those weeks.
Geese.
Yeah, it's just one of those weeks. LeVar did the same thing to me. So all his players had an amazing game. Nothing you can do about it. Move on.
Yeah, all right. We will. Yeah, we will move. You're saying cut Beckham loose, but how much do you think that Beckham injury is going to affect this team in the future?
I mean, you got Bailey, or Thielen, what the fuck his name is, Bailey on Bailey. He's fine. Just shove him in there and move on. Coming from a guy who cuts everybody every week, I really don't have much sympathy for anybody getting hurt. I really don't care. And that can help me out for next week.
Yeah, so Gaze is the king of next man up. So I would say, in terms of the loss of Beckham, I mean, you mentioned this to me when you texted after the game, that you had success when Beckham didn't play well. And that points to me that there's enough depth on this team that you'll be fine. Listen, Amendola benefits from the fact that Edelman's hurt. And, Gronkowski, Gronkowski's always been an injury risk. So if Amendola and you have Hogan as well, I think, again, New England's not a team that runs the ball well, so I think Brady's going to consistently still have to rely on those two receivers. I think it's a good receiver core. You add them up together, I think that's what Beckham would be. And then, having McCoy and Hunt, I think, is one of the better running back candidates in the league. So I don't think the loss of Beckham's going to hurt you that much. I think it's the difference of in the playoffs in terms of seeding, and I think Beckham would have locked you in for very likely a shot at the championship game. Now I think you're still at the foregone conclusion of going to the playoffs. It's now a question of how far you go.
I unfortunately agree with that assessment. All right. I'm quite depressed about it. All right, so let's move on to the next game. The game that Lombardi, who was on the program last week, called the lock of the week against him. He was wrong on that. So it seems when you bet against yourself, it seems like you end up winning. So good for him. He ends up squeaking out this game 112 to 103 against the Millennials. It actually looked like it was going to be much more of a blowout, but the Millennials made it close with the 26.6 points from McKinnon. But yeah, the Millennials now, who called this an easy league, is now spotted the league 4 losses. He gets most of his points from Alex Smith, who's been really good this season with 32.86 points. But then Amari Cooper, who has just been vacant, only gets 1. Kelvin Benjamin with 15.8. Only 7.6 from Howard. Now, had Howard actually had a decent game, he could have pulled out this win, but it just didn't happen. And like I said, McKinnon with 26.6 points. And then Delaney Walker with only 5. 6.9 from Randall Cobb. Disappointing showing there. 5 from the kicker and 1 from the Arizona defense. For Lombardi, who thought he was going to have a bad week, and I mean, he did, but still won. 27.82 points from Philip Rivers against a very weak Giants defense. I mean, Rivers has not been that good this season at all, and it's been reflected in the record, but at least this one, I mean, he's playing against an even more hard team. So he gets to 27 points. Keenan Allen with only 10, 9.9 from Mike Evans, the vaunted Mike Evans against the weak New England defense, but still doesn't even crack double digits. Lamar Miller with 10.9. Okay, that's decent score. Blount with only 7.4. Ertz, who's been really good, has probably been one of his best players with 18.1 points on Philadelphia. Javon Curse gets into double digits with 13.8, and then 2 from the kicker and 12 from the Baltimore defense. Yeah, I mean, this comes down to Millennials not really having. I mean, I guess had they played Aguilar instead of Cooper, they would have won. But I mean, are you really going to make that call? I mean, they could have also played Marvin Jones Jr. and I think they would have instead of Cooper, and they would have gotten the win just barely. I don't know. And the Millennials hasn't been. I mean, look, I have them give them a lot of credit on the McKinnon pickup. I mean, that made the difference in this game. I mean, you take McKinnon out of this lineup, and it's like, holy crap, is that crap? Other than Alex Smith. But they've at least shored themselves up there a little bit at running back. Howard, I mean, you would expect better things from him, but I don't know. I mean, there's weaknesses all around. I mean, they need Amari Cooper to start producing, and I mean, really, the solid player that they have essentially is Alex Smith. I mean, maybe McKinnon is that guy going forward with the Dalvin Cook injury, but I don't know. It's tough. And then for the Blues, what's going on here? Nothing. I mean, like, I mean, I've been Facebook battling with him over the trade and everything else, over the last week and everything. But I mean, like this, maybe I'm giving you help, Lombardi, by calling your team garbage. But I look at this and this looks like garbage to me. But maybe it'll change next week. I don't know. Other than Zach Ertz is great. And then anybody else on this team that you really fear week in and week out? I'm not saying that these guys can't produce every once in a while, but I mean, Devonta Freeman, I guess, on the bench, he had the bye week. Certainly not fearing R. Kelly in the closet. Tyrod. I mean, yeah. I mean, Freeman maybe the other guy. I mean, I know Geese, you hate Mike Evans, and I never really liked him either. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this game, Geese?
Like I said, Lombardi at some point quoted that he hated his team, so that's just going to give you some great insight as to what he was thinking about his auction this season. And I don't know. It's hard to really. He beat Eugene. I mean, Eugene up to the point where he almost won that week, or the other way around. Lombardi almost won that week. He had the most points in the league, and then Eugene just squeaked him out. So his team can put up the numbers. Just on paper, Rivers, the turnover machine. We're just waiting for Allen to get injured. I hate Mike Evans. Like I said, I can't stand Mike Evans. Fuck that guy. Miller doesn't scare anybody. Blount doesn't scare anybody. Ertz has been very consistent. Jermaine Kearse is another Hagler cast-off, which is kind of ironic. It's a lot of Hagler cast-offs in this league making their appearances. And, you stream your kickers in defense, but Lombardi's team, I mean, Brandon Marshall, that's a nightmare. Bench-wise, I mean, one of the things that I always go back to is let's look at the moves that are made here. The Blues have made 9 moves. I don't know. Should these teams be active? That's my question. What do you think?
Well, I think. Well, first of all, I think Lombardi is almost like Miner in terms of he's the type of team that on some weeks they will get massive amounts of points, like he did last week against Eugene, but he ended up losing. And then he'll have weeks like this where he'll just be. I mean, he's not the worst team, and frankly, his record is pretty good, especially in this league right now. But it's very inconsistent. Like, and I also think, like, for example, like I know I'm playing him in week 9 when a lot of my guys are out. I mean, he's probably going to win that week, based on that, and he has a history of beating me anyway in important games, which I freaking hate. But I don't know. So, all right, Nick, your thoughts on this game? Any aspect of it?
Yeah, I think Alex Smith is for real. I think the Chiefs are. I would probably mention the best team in the AFC, and I think that's they're legit this year. They've got skilled players all over the field. That safety football game that Alex Smith plays, like the yards are coming now. We're just seeing better play from him. With St. Louis, it's funny because San Diego is just a bad team, and you would think Philip Rivers is going to just have to play from behind for this season. So he would just rack up a just ton of garbage time points. Unfortunately, Keenan Allen, who I do like a lot, is too injury prone, and you can't trust him. Although this weekend they're playing against Oakland, it's a bad secondary, so I can see Allen getting a touchdown and probably getting possibly up to 20 points. I like Mike Evans, but Mike Evans is way too inconsistent for me. Zach Ertz is definitely the biggest surprise in this team. The rest of the way, it's a team that I see some bright spots, but not many. I do agree that Philip Rivers is not clearly the quarterback that he used to be. So he's kind of entering that sort of Carson Palmer territory where it's going to be it's just not going to be good. He cannot be the highest scorer on your team if you're trying to build a sustainable team that's going to get to the playoffs. And it's just another one of those things. He's 3-2, and I'm kind of surprised by that actually. On the other hand, for the Millennials, again, the Raider fan here, Amari Cooper, there's something wrong. That offense in Oakland, there's something not right. They may get it back together this weekend against the Chargers. I know there was a concerted effort. I mean, there was a lot of missed opportunities for Cooper last week against Baltimore. It was a report just coming out of the team where Jack Del Rio on tape just noticed there was like 4 or 5 times that Cooper was wide open. But it's EJ Manuel. It's like, what do you expect? Getting a starting quarterback next week. And Cooper's had good games against San Diego, so I think Cooper should return to form. Kelvin Benjamin, I think, is pretty solid. Jarek McKinnon, that number's a bit high, so and he's definitely going to edge it. He'll definitely be the premier rusher for Minnesota this season. But yeah, I don't see where I don't see this getting better for the Millennials. Although it's quite possible the Raiders' offense improves. They've got a winnable game this weekend. They play a tough game against Kansas City next Thursday night, even though it's in Oakland. So there might be an opportunity there. But I think the Millennials go as far as the Raiders go. The Raiders haven't been great this year, so I think that explains why the Millennials are struggling. But there are some bright spots. I think, again, like I said, I think Alex Smith is going to be consistent this year. And looking at the bench. Nelson Aguilar, that's just not consistent for his scoring totals. So it's not. I don't think this is a good team, and this is a little similar to Nick and Jamie's situation where coming out of the auction, they're guys you get from the same team where you assume that your team's fortunes are based on how that team does in reality. And similar to Nick and Jamie, the Patriots, like the Raiders, have underperformed this year. And this is what happens when you sort of connect players of the same team together. And I think the Millennials are suffering because quite honestly, the Raiders are suffering. So, I don't know if it's going to get better.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move.
Amari Cooper, biggest fantasy bust this season. I think it's what's interesting.
Geese was asking, do you think Amari Cooper is the biggest fantasy bust of the season? He might be.
I think so. I mean, I think he was supposed to be a top 10 receiver, and we're nowhere near that at this point. I'd say he's in the upper echelon for one of the biggest surprises this year. But you can even make the same argument for Derek Carr. I mean, he's obviously out last week with an injury. But the Raiders have just underperformed offensively, which was, I think, one of the better offenses in the league last year. So that doesn't surprise me. I mean, that's again. Cooper's going to be only as good as the quarterback that's throwing him the ball, and I think they have not had consistent play. They've also had a tough schedule. I think Washington and Denver back-to-back are really good defenses. We'll see if the Raiders recover. But I would say Cooper's definitely probably one of the biggest busts this year. Him and Jordy Nelson, I think, are two of the bigger surprises.
I actually think that Jordy Nelson has not been that bad. I mean, at least in terms of points, but which has helped till a trade team, but all right, we can get to that game actually. So this is the last game of the week, and it was really one of the most exciting games in fantasy football of the week. It's also, I'm sure, Eugene's favorite part of the podcast when we get to talk about him. But yeah, an amazing comeback by Eugene's team here. I mean, first of all, this was a game that Tillett really could have, been in second place. He ends up at fourth, and Eugene continues to roll and gets himself right in the mix with everybody else on this game, and it's really on one play. But before we get into that one play, so 36.74 points from Prescott, only 10 from Jordy Nelson, but I mean, like I said, and that's off of a receiving touchdown. But other than that, I mean, he had 23, at the game that he didn't really play, and then 20.
So I mean, he's been pretty good. This is the first game that he's actually gotten under 20, other than the one where he was kind of injured. Jordan Landry, 15 points, whereas Parker only got 1.6 at the flex. Todd Gurley with a poor game for him. I mean, only 5 points, but I mean, he's been amazing all season long. Other than that, he also had that play where he reached out for the pylon and it was, fumbled it and it was a touchback. I mean, that could have changed this around. Certainly, I mean that. I mean, so I guess if you want to look at another play, I mean, it wasn't at the end, but it was a play that changed everything. I mean, you add the touchdown there, he gets the extra 6 points. He ends up winning this game. So I mean, that really turned this around. Frank Gore with 11.6 points, 15 from Graham, and then not much after that. Only 14 from Russell Wilson, 13.5 from Brandon Cooks. Bilal Powell came back to earth after the 29-point game and ends up getting only 7.3, and I think he had an injury in that too. Le'Veon Bell also comes back down to a normal earth-like level of 19.3. Croft, the tight end from Cincinnati, gets 7.8, and Doug Baldwin was 7.7. But the real story of this game, 27.20 points from DeAndre Hopkins. And this game, so going into the last play of Sunday night, Tillett had a 112 to, I think it was like a 110 thing, and it was literally the last play of the game. Watson Yayas throws to Hopkins, gets the touchdown, turned it all around, and that's what won this game for Eugene. So tremendously exciting to watch, especially with the implications of this game in the standings. But I mean, it really came to. So I guess two plays. So it really came down to that last second play, which was the exciting part of it, and Todd Gurley getting that fumble on the pylon, which cost the 6 points there that would have changed the game around. Okay, Geese, thoughts on this game?
Oh yeah. Really, Eugene should be thanking what's the safety's name from Seattle, Earl Thomas, for that little swipe away at the last second, because that would have totally changed this game around. The thing about Tillett Trey, when is it going to be time to get Pierre Garçon in the game? I mean, he's got 17 points at the bench. I mean, he's been basically pretty consistent all season long. I mean, this one's not even close if Garçon gets in there. I mean, there's a point where you start him, sit him with Gurley. You're not going to get 37 every single time. And sometimes you have to look at the matchups. I mean, you can ride your horse till the end, but that was pretty brutal. And, of course, Eugene, the infamous Le'Veon Bell trade, gets his 19 points. I don't hear much from the pundits this week. I guess they moved on to another topic. But, pretty close game. Powell, like I said, came down to earth. I'm not surprised he even got 7.3. I was expecting more like 1.3. Maybe he'll get that this week. And, yeah, pretty much it. I mean, I was all caught up in my Deshaun Watson celebrations, even noticed. Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins blew it up. And then in the final play of the game, that was pretty big. But, yeah, that was a big win for Eugene. That puts him right in there at 3-2.
Yeah.
And, move Tillett into the pile as well. There's a lot of 3-2 teams right now. It's a log jam.
And
3-2 is the new log jam.
It is. And then, I mean, yeah, I think, I mean, and Tillett, I think, is fine still. I mean, look, you ride Gurley. There's no reason that you don't. I mean, he's great, and he just had an off game this game. And then I think, you replace Devontae Parker, and you finally give Pierre Garçon a chance, until it's fine. I mean, this was almost a win. This was, I mean, that one play or those two plays change around, and then we're talking about Tillett Trey being 4-1 in second place, and Eugene being 2-3. So, I mean, there are two plays that just that had the biggest impact on this part of the season so far. So, Nick, your thoughts on this game? And I know you got to go soon, so let's do it in a somewhat.
I think again that Dalvin Cook injury kind of played into a factor in this game as well.
Absolutely. He's a team that suffered with the injuries, but he's been pretty deep. So I'm still not that worried about Tillett Trey team in terms of he's a deep team, and I think that he's still one of the better teams in the league. Nick.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Todd Gurley is just solid. I think even if it's a bad match against Seattle, you still start him. We talked earlier about Jordy Nelson. He's still being a pretty stable, receiver. Dak Prescott, obviously, is just a good start quarterback. Devontae Parker, again, had worked out really well. Same thing with Charles Landry, but unfortunately, Jay Cutler was just dog shit. And and to start both receivers with that guy as quarterback is just a bad move. So I like Jim a lot. I mean, it's interesting because he's got Matt Ryan on the bench, and I think that's fantastic trade bait. The rest of the way, Pierre Garcon, I think I had not paid as much attention to the Niners this year, so I think Garcon having that 17 points obviously is probably higher than his average.
It's not though. It's not though. Look at it. Look at his average over the last few games. He got 17. All right, the week before that he only got 7.6, but 21, 5.6, and then 14. So, I mean, it's been every other week, but every other week he's had a great game.
It's interesting. Yeah, it is interesting because for one, with his targets to his receptions, it's actually pretty high. But yeah, you're looking at yardage totals, like 94, 36, 142, 26, 81. Fairly consistent. I mean, no touchdowns yet this season, but is and also pretty high yards per reception. So he does produce. But I would definitely not. I would have probably started him over Parker just because I think the quarterback situation in Miami is just bad. But I agree with Dave. I think this is actually a very good team, and I think Gurley. They'll go as far as Gurley offers them, and I think Gurley's a solid pickup, and I think Frank Gore always is like the perennial running back to always go with. Eugene, I like Eugene's team. I mean, I think Hopkins is great. I think Wilson is a pretty strong quarterback. Cooks is going to be a little hit and miss. Again, Le'Veon Bell. As I said before, I don't think I clearly wouldn't have made that trade. And I think that's going to be the move that's going to secure Eugene a spot in the playoffs. And then looking at his bench, Amir Abdullah for the Lions has been a nice little surprise this year. And then again, he's got Andrew Luck coming off the bench. So same situation, like which quarterback do you want to go with?
If he ever plays, Andrew Luck is still injured and out, and I don't know how long he's going to be out for. So
yeah, I mean they were speculating this week or next week for him to return. So I think they're stringing that along. So I mean Wilson's just a smart play, obviously right now, but it's actually a pretty decent. It's actually a pretty decent team. So I can see this end up being as good a matchup as it is. I mean that's awesome that it came down to a last second play. It really changed everything. And that's just kind of how it works in some of these close games in fantasy. But that being in third and fourth, that makes perfect sense. And again, I said, being 4-1 for me is, I think, a little deceptive. I mean, I think I'm definitely in that category of being a winning team, but not second place is a little high for the squad that we're rolling out right now. But this almost looks like Eugene and Jim. This almost looks like what may well be a playoff matchup. They're both really solid teams. I think this is going to be a fun matchup going the rest of the way. I think they're both going to be in it every week.
I agree, and if you just look at the league, I mean, because I think the Eugene's team started out 0-2, and then after that, I mean, he's just won 3 in a row. He did start out 0-2, and he's won 3 in a row now, and now he finds himself in third place, right behind the top of the leaderboard, which, I mean, in 3 weeks has just completely changed the season around. So if we look at the standings, you and I, the 1603ers and Nicky Baby, are at 4-1. Still a large. I think it's like a 70-point lead that I have there in points for. But you did a lot to close that gap because it was going to be a lot more before this beatdown that you put down this week. Then after that, you have Dave Secret Crush and Tilla Trey team. Like I said, 2 teams that are really great going against each other, and I think that they're two of the best teams in this league, just up and down. Then I just heard Eugene laughing at the idea of me saying up and down, but with his little puns. Anyway, so then after that, you have Black Ice Dynasty with 3-2 in the logjam, the St. Louis Blues, the Hagglers, the Lightning Rods, and then you have one team, Nick and Jamie, at 2-3, and then you have the Millennials and the Special Team at 1-4, and House Targaryen in the cellar. So I think if you look at the 3-2, Logjam. I think that clearly Dave's Secret Crush and Tillet Trey are the best of that group. And then I think, even though the points aren't there yet, maybe put the Hagglers in that conversation. Then you have, at least since the revised, Deshaun Watson, and they're streaming your team. So I think that maybe puts them up in there. And then I think if you have Black Ice Dynasty and the St. Louis Blues, you know, they're like I said, they're the teams that will catch you on a certain week and have amazing games, and then they have the really poor games, and I think 3-2 is basically where they should be, and they're in that mix. I think the Lightning Rods, they're not in that category right now. And Nick and Jamie, they have some tough sledding to go, especially if Gronk is going to be out, and then yeah, the teams at 1-4 and certainly at 0-5 are. They need to do something, and they need to do something fast. So any thoughts on the standings before we go to the next games? Like like I said, Nick, I know you want to go soon, so let's, I guess, quickly run through it.
I think what I would say about the three, looking at the standings, you look at just sort of like just points for and points against. So I look at a team like, say, I started Eugene's team, right? Looking at the points against, I would have to assume that the first couple of weeks he was getting blown out, which explains why there's a difference in that point total.
Yeah.
3-2, but actually being minus in points scored does make you question how sustainable that's going to be, because I think there are a lot of higher scoring teams in the league. Same can go for me to some extent. I've got a high point. I think last week really explains why I'm that much of a separation in points for and against. I think though when I look at this, I think the number one team, this being you, that's a difference of 140. What? Yeah, it's a difference of 140 points. The 603. That's a high scoring team, and they're going up. They're having weeks where they're just absolutely going up against some of the worst offerings that people have offensively. But I think that's an interesting way to measure that. I look at House Targaryen only scoring 427 points in the season. That's right there why they're 0-5. There's just not enough offensive firepower there.
Yeah.
And you look at teams like the Lightning Rods and like Nick and Jamie at 612 points. That's actually higher than that point total higher than the second, third, and fourth teams in the league. So that's again, if Gronk is healthy, that's why they actually will jump ahead in the standings pretty quickly. So, gentlemen, it is my time to go, so I am going to wrap up on that note. This was fun. I will be back. Hi, Nick.
All right, yeah, well, we miss you certainly on the program. Have a good night. Thanks for your time. And I guess we can get into to the next week's game, you and I, Geese. But any comments on the standings at this point? Because it's really interesting how these standings are shaking out when you look at them right now, and we're almost at the halfway point of the season. So next week it'll be week 6, and then the week after that puts us over the hump of the halfway point. So what do you see when you look at these standings at this point so far?
Well, like you said, if you're at this point, if you're not 3-2, it's going to be an uphill climb for the rest of the year, definitely. The teams that are 1-4, 0-5, you really got to get it in gear, because that's like the perimeter of what you can afford to really slide right now. They really got to start chalking together some wins, because we're getting to the halfway point, and once you get to 500, you're probably going to be negative in the point total. You're going to have to win more than that. So it's getting pretty close right now.
Yeah, it certainly is. And to have 8 teams, at 3-2, when and only 6 make it already, you're really against the 8 ball at that point. So they're going to have to start making moves. They're going to have to start doing things, to get themselves back in this. And if you're House Targaryen, you really need to pick up the pace at this point. Which brings us to this week's game, which I know has been circled on the calendar of both the Millennials and House Targaryen. I was hoping to have them both on the program to talk trash against each other, but
The Millennials is texting me. He's on a date, and I don't know where House Targaryen is. But this is quite an interesting game, and basically, I think, look, if House Targaryen loses this, I mean, he could just the season's done for him. If the Millennials loses this, then he's right down there with them. That House Targaryen has dragged them both down, and I think that they're both in significant trouble at this point. Right now, the Millennials are favored. Um, if you go inside the numbers, so you have Alex Smith versus Pittsburgh, Amari Cooper versus the Chargers, Kelvin Benjamin versus Philadelphia, Howard at Baltimore, McKinnon versus Green Bay, Walker versus Indianapolis, Cobb at Minnesota. For House Targaryen, he has Wentz at Carolina, and Carolina's not, they're nothing to sneeze at. Golden Tate at New Orleans. That should be a favorable matchup for him with all the points that they give up there. I'm sure he'll replace Richardson, who's on a bye. Duke Johnson at Houston. That might be okay. Ellington. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Adrian Peterson going to Arizona and how that affects his touches there. Clay Anabai, so I'm sure he'll replace him. Maybe with Ingram, and Ingram might, going against Denver, Ingram might get some touches now that the Giants literally have no receivers. So we'll see if he gets an increase in production there. And then, I don't know. I guess he puts in Julio Jones, obviously, back in for Richardson if he's playing. I mean, there's certain things that he could do here, but I don't know. I tend to favor the Millennials in this game. But I know hockey is going to be like a madman trying to do everything he can to win this game because I know he's circled it on his calendar. So I think it'll be a close game. But I think if just looking at this, I think I give the slight edge to the Millennials. What do you think?
I don't know if you can actually do that because Alex Smith and the new pickup McKinnon are basically the whole Millennials team. Cooper's a bust, Benjamin's a bust. Howard splitting time with Tariq Cohen.
Yeah.
Delaney Walker has been very average, and Randall has taken a backseat to Devontae Adams, the cyborg. Wentz pretty much cancels out Alex Smith for the most part. They pretty much get. Yeah, I don't know if you can give the edge to the Millennials in this one. This is a very close game. I actually might give the edge to Dr. Hockey depending on who he replaces Richardson and Clay with.
Well, obviously he's going to put in Julio Jones as long as he's playing. So,
Right.
And he'll move up Ingram into the tight end slot. And then I guess he plays DeMarco Murray at this point, or Marshawn Lynch. I mean, it makes sense to make one of those two. I mean, look, I'm certainly, Amari Cooper's been terrible. But, I mean, if he can get some points, I think this could be a close game. But I don't know. I mean, maybe the matchups. I think Tate actually does get some points this week, finally, going against New Orleans. I think that'll be a shootout. But I don't know. It's an interesting game. So you're going to go with House Targaryen?
I'm going to go with House Targaryen on this one because Julio Jones is going to be back in the lineup. And Millennials really, outside of McKinnon, hasn't made a lot of noise since week one.
Yeah. And Alex Smith. Yeah. I can see your pick. I'm just going to still stick with the Millennials, but I certainly understand where you're coming from in making that pick. All right, let's move on to the next game, which is let's do this game, the Blues versus Tillett Trey team. I think this is actually going to be an interesting game looking at it. Right now, the projection is 129 to 121 in favor of the Blues. Obviously, this is early and people make a lot of changes along the way. But Tillett Trey has already put in Matt Ryan against Miami. I think that's a good move, especially at home. Jordy Nelson at Minnesota. I think he'll have an okay game. Landry at Atlanta. I don't know how Landry gets any points, but I think that he continues to get points, so I think he'll be fine there. Gurley at Jacksonville. That might be a tough matchup, especially with how good Jacksonville has been. Frank Gore at Tennessee. I think Gore can do some things there. Bennett at Minnesota. He got some points last week, so he might be okay. And it looks like he's already listened to our advice by putting in Pierre Garçon at the flex position. He also picked up Lutz, the kicker, versus Detroit. I think that's a good pickup. And then the Houston defense. For the Blues, he has Phillip Rivers at Oakland. I think that Phillip Rivers can do good things there. And then Keenan Allen throwing to him.
and I think that he might get a touchdown there. I think that that combo might actually work out in this game. Mike Evans at Arizona, I still don't trust Mike Evans. He might be okay, but I don't, whatever. Look, this could be the game that he goes off. I don't know. I still don't have that much faith in him, especially with consistency. But I mean, he could have an okay game against Arizona. Lamar Miller versus Cleveland, I think that that's a decent matchup. Devonta Freeman versus Miami. I think Freeman will actually get a lot of numbers in this game. Zach Ertz, he's been great. I think he will continue to be great against Carolina. And then Jermaine Kearse versus New England. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if he has anybody else to put in there. Riddick, maybe, against New Orleans. Blount against Carolina, no. Yeah, so right now the Blues are a slight favorite. This is a tough game for me to pick, actually. I don't know. Who are you gonna pick?
Well, it would have been a tough game for me, but I have a feeling the loss of Dalvin Cook may have killed it on a little bit of a slide here. I'm gonna go with the Blues.
Mm-hmm.
And finally put in Pierre Garçon, which is good. I don't know. I think Lombardi's been rolling with this lineup. It's pretty solid. Looking at Tillett's lineup, I think Landry might be an issue. He might have to be yanked out of there, but his replacement option is Parker. Sammy Watkins-Gay is still a tough matchup, and Jeremy Maclin he's hobbling.
Yeah, no, but
He's just making the rounds. He's a whore like Marvin Jones Jr. He's making the rounds. I'm a little bit worried about his wide receiver 2 position, and I think with Marlon Mack getting a lot of touches in Indianapolis, Tillett may have to raise an eyebrow with that at some point and pay attention to that. So I say it's the slightest of edge, but I'm gonna go with Lombardi.
yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I mean, look, I will say this about Landry. Landry, he got 20 points the first week, 10, 10, 15. So he's gotten double digits every week. I don't think I'm that concerned about Landry, and especially pulling out Parker. I think that was the right move out of the two. I think that Matt Ryan can have a good day versus Miami, certainly. And I think Garcon against Washington will get some points, and surprisingly, the kicker versus Detroit will actually get some points. But I'm with you. I actually think that Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen are going to have a good day, and I think that that's going to put them over the top slightly. I think Devonta Freeman is also going to counteract anything that Matt Ryan does, and I think him against Miami is going to have a good day, and I think Ertz is going to have a good day. I'm actually going to pick the Blues in this game too. Just because of those little things, and I think it really has to do a lot with the Oakland game for both of the Chargers players. But yeah, I'm gonna pick the Blues in this game as well. But this is a hugely important game. I mean, 3-2 for both of these teams. The one who wins this really is right in the thick of everything. The one who loses this, obviously, still in good position. They'll be at 500, but it's a lot different being 3-3 versus being 4-2. So.
Oh yeah, this is nothing short of a playoff game right now.
I mean, it's not a playoff game. I mean, I think both of these teams will be making the playoffs probably, but one of them might have to actually struggle to get there. Whereas I think the winner of this looks, especially as you get to the halfway point of the season, looks to be in a good spot. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly going to be watching this game. I think this is a really good game. Okay. Let's look at Nicky Baby versus Nick and Jamie, the Nick battle. So right now it's almost even, 125 to 124 in terms of projection in favor of Nick and Jamie over Nicky Baby. So you have Tom Brady going at the Jets, Antonio Brown at KC. That's a tough matchup there. Alshon Jeffrey at Carolina, the new Jones guy in Green Bay at Minnesota. C.J. Anderson finally comes back, and C.J. Anderson has had a good season so far, and he's going versus the Giants right now, who are just in trouble. So C.J. Anderson might actually have a good game here. Gronk, as long as he's back, he's at the Jets. Although I still don't know what his status is in Rashard Matthews versus Indianapolis. And I actually think Rashard Matthews can have a good game there. He's got to replace his defense too, as Seattle's on the bye. For Nicky Baby,
Aaron Rodgers, he's going at Minnesota. Will Fuller versus Cleveland. I think that that's a good matchup there. Crabtree versus the Chargers. I think that he can do well there. Fournette versus the Rams. He can also do well. Henry, he's got to get him out of there. Cook, also out of there. Devontae Adams, the cyborg at Minnesota. He'll do fine. But he's got a whole bunch of guys coming back. So let's see. He's got Deshaun Jackson to work with. Mark Ingram. Colonel Sanders, are you chicken, going against the Giants. Reed versus San Francisco. That's a good matchup there. So he clearly needs to put in Jordan Reed, by the way, over Cook. Terrell Pryor, who versus San Francisco, he might be all right. And then, Trubisky, he's obviously not going to play him as long as Aaron Rodgers is going. Ooh, this is a tough game to call. I'm not sure about this.
Okay. You know what? Yeah, this is going to be a tough game to call. And on a side note, I think when Nick's daughter gets of Reed age and she creates a team, she should call herself Nikki's Baby. That'd be a clever little play there to, keep the legacy going. Anyway, back to the actual game. Yeah, Nick and Jamie right now, going to be the same three-headed monster with Jones maybe contributing points and C.J. Anderson back. Be a more dangerous team right here, definitely.
Yeah. And Matthews has that good matchup. But go ahead.
Yeah, Matthews. I don't know why you like this guy. Dude, I look at him every week. I'm like, get this guy out of here. But if I look at their bench, they have no wide receivers. They're all running backs anyway. So maybe he has to stay. Nick with his proverbial Aaron Rodgers. Crabtree's back in the lineup. Fournette's just a beastly, and Henry's got to go. Cook has got to go. The cyborg is back in action once again. And then the Jacksonville defense. I mean, this is going to be another. I got to give it to Nick again. This is just ridiculous.
I mean, he puts in Jordan Reed, obviously, for Cook. I think he has to. And then he puts in Ingram for Henry. I think he gets a lot of points out of this game. But and then especially with the Jacksonville defense on top of that against the Rams, who do turn it over. But Nick and Jamie also are going to put in some defense that they're going to stream, I would imagine. And as long as Gronkowski goes, I don't know what the latest status is. I mean, he was held out of practice on Wednesday, but he's expected to play. And they're going against the Jets.
Yeah.
So I actually think that this is going to be a high-scoring game for both of these teams. But I could see Nick, as long as he makes those moves, takes out Henry, puts in Reed, that Nick pulls it out with another big scoring game. I think he's turned the corner on that, and we'll get some points there. I'm going to pick Nicky Baby over Nick and Jamie, slightly, I think. But don't get me wrong. What?
I'm going Nicky Baby.
Yeah.
I'm going Nicky Baby as well.
Yeah, I mean, but don't get me wrong. I think that that Nick and Jamie are going to have a good game here. I'm not calling this a blowout by any stretch of the imagination, because I think Jones and Anderson are going to get a lot of points. Antonio Brown is still going to get his points. Gronk and Brady are also going to get points, I think. So I'm not selling them short on this game. I think that Nicky Baby is going to pull this one out, but that's not to take anything away from Nick and Jamie on this in this game, and they could certainly get it. Yeah. All right. So, moving on, let's look at the Lightning Rods versus Black Ice Dynasty. Right now, Black Ice Dynasty is a favorite, 118 to 108 over the Lightning Rods. I know that Miner doesn't edit his lineup until the last second, but so right now he has Jameis Winston at Arizona, but didn't he pick up he picked up Carson Palmer versus Tampa Bay? He's obviously going to play him. T.Y. Hilton at Tennessee. Hilton can have an okay game there. He still has Marquise Lee in there again against the Rams. I can't imagine him playing that. Melvin Gordon at Oakland. He'll have a good game. McCaffrey versus Philadelphia. Great. Then Kamara versus Detroit. But he's suffering from having AJ Green on the bench, Eddie Lacy. Well, that's not suffering. That's being gifted. That. But so he has to play Marquise Lee at this point. But you never know with Miners lineup what it's going to look like on Sunday. But the AJ Green being on the bench might hurt him there. For the Lightning Rods, yes, Cam Newton versus Philadelphia. I think Cam Newton will have a big game there. Tyreek Hill versus Pittsburgh. He could have an okay game. He's playing Gabriel versus Miami. Jay Ajayi at Atlanta, not a good move. He's the McGuire guy, Elijah McGuire. I mean, I guess because Bilal Powell is injured. Let's see how that goes. Kyle Rudolph and then Martavius Bryant. Is he still not playing Des Bryant? Oh, he's on a bye. Okay, so finally, you're excused. So Matt Bryant going against KC and then Gostkowski in the Carolina defense. I'm going to pick Miner in this game because of the running backs. I think the running backs are clearly better for Miner. Yeah, I mean T.Y. Hill. I mean Marquise Lee. I don't. He'll get like under 10 probably. He has wide receivers that could certainly keep up with what the Lightning Rods are putting up. And frankly, these are both 3-2 teams. I think that I am surprised that the Lightning Rods are a 3-2 team, whereas I'm not surprised that Miner is a 3-2 team. So I'm gonna pick Black Ice Dynasty in this game.
Well, first of all, I hope Miner listens to these podcasts. I got to give LeVar Miner a big shout out. Now, I've been playing against this guy for over 20 years. All right, we go way, way, way back. But the original season of almost the second season of the BHL, I think, is when we first started. Was he in the original with Acapini? I think he might have been. Right?
He was actually in the first season. You were not. So yes.
So he goes even farther back than I do. I got LeVar Miner. You can throw this lineup out the window. He has a knack for game day changes like I've never seen. Like, this lineup will be completely revamped. This means nothing right now in this podcast.
That's true. As we saw last week against me. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So just assuming this is what we have to work with, AJ Green being out could create an opening, which I'm sure LeVar Miner, he's like Belichick. So he'll take care of it. He'll take care of it. Whatever looks bad, he'll clean it up in post. Okay, it'll be cleaned up before the kickoff. So I really got to commend him on the Kamara move. It was a three-headed monster, and Sean Payton really leaned on this guy. If you click on the yellow tab sheet there, his numbers have been getting out of control lately. That was a great pickup by Miner. And with Adrian Peterson gone, it just gets even worse. This Kamara guy could be the next Fournette, could be the next Hunt. Like, he's a sneaky good pick.
Yeah.
McCaffrey is clearly the man over Stewart. And Melvin Gordon, if he has those kind of monster games, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm picking LeVar in this one. Now,
yeah.
Despite them in there, I'm just taking mine. This lineup will be completely revamped. You watch.
One, it'll be completely revamped, and even if it's not, it's still pretty damn good. Like, just looking at it now, I mean, like the pieces that he has to, work in there. I mean, Marquise Lee out of there, and then Jameis Winston he's going to replace with Carson Palmer. I'm picking Miner in this too, and the same thing. I mean, I echo your sentiments. I don't know if he listens to it or not, but I mean, you want to talk about a competitor from 20 plus years. I mean, he is, and the defending champ. And, you combine that with Shauna, who also was the champ before that. I mean, you can never count Miner out. I mean, he's, as far as, and just, skill in terms of video games and in terms of fantasy. I mean, he's a competitor. He is a tried and true competitor. And there's a reason why he's as good as he's been in the center for all of these years. And yeah, I'm picking him in this game, clearly. Unless he has an off week, but I just don't think he will. I just don't see it happening this week.
No, I think this is where he puts together his third perfect game, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't even think he needs it this week, frankly. But yeah, I think he's going to have a good game this week. All right, speaking about the team that he defeated, my team, the 1603ers versus the special team. This is a little bit different. The 4-1 1603ers versus the 1-4 special team. Now, I don't want you to look at the record and sleep on it. First of all, right now it's an even split, 50-50 chance to win, 122 to 123. Um, uh, he's got Breeze back going versus Detroit. I think Breeze will get some points there now. I'm still questioning whether or not to play Matthew Stafford in that game. I very well might, though. He was listed as questionable, so I'm kind of waiting on that. And Kirk Cousins versus San Francisco might actually be a good matchup, too. Then you have Demaryius Thomas. I think that is a higher projection that he normally would get, but he's going against the Giants, who suck at this point, and Hogan against the Jets. So I don't know. That's Hogan should get the edge in this matchup, but I don't know that it necessarily happens this week. Amendola, so once again we're rolling with two New England guys, and I think that's dependent on whether or not Gronkowski comes back. Then you have Michael Thomas versus Detroit. I think he'll have a good game. Kareem Hunt, I think he'll be fine against Pittsburgh. We're bringing back Thompson versus San Francisco. I think he should bounce back after that Kansas City game. For Whalers, Carlos Hyde and Isaiah Crowell. I think that if you're looking at a weak spot in it, I think that the running back combo over there in the special team might be a problem. He did pick up Dixon, which is good, and Kelsey's still in the concussion protocol, which might be a problem at this point if he doesn't play. Then James White, so rolling with 3 Patriots at this point, and Allen for the running back for the Whalers, who's been pretty good. Yeah, I mean, this is a close game. I mean, McCoy's out for this game, so that's kind of difficult. There's still question marks around Kelsey. I mean, if anything, if the 1603ers win this game, I think it's largely based on the running back tandem of the Whalers. But we'll see how that plays out. I'm going to slightly pick myself only because of that. But if he makes any adjustments, he could overcome it. And I don't think that you could look at this based on record and think otherwise. Yeah, I don't think you should be distracted by the record. I think that you should look at this game and know that it'll probably be a close game. But go ahead.
Yeah, I know that you are someone who actually does listen to the podcast by default, because broadcast. But again, once again, going back to the Maya thing, here's somebody who, again, I played for probably, 20 seasons, going back to the original Center Baseball League. I'm going to throw some history in there. Getting inside the head of Coach Dave Harbacken, I don't think you're going to say that I'm wrong on these 3 points that are going through your mind right now. Knowing Coach Harbacken for 20-plus years, number one, Kirk Cousins. This is the first time he's going with somebody other than Roethlisberger, Stafford, or Palmer. That's got to be a concern for Coach Harbacken. Point number two, the loss of Odell Beckham. Now, you're playing Hogan and Amendola basically because you have to. One has to think, what does that factor into the mind of the coach? Like, what would Beckham do if he was in there? And number three, of course, Thompson shit the bed the last time he was out there. So that's got to be in the back of your mind. So are those 3 points pretty valid?
They are very valid. Absolutely. And Kelsey being questionable is certainly in my mind right now.
Okay, so with that being said, Drew Brees is just, he's just a monster. He's going to get his point. Demaryius Thomas, you got to know when to cut bait. He is a Amari Cooper in disguise. I mean, he hasn't had as bad a week as Cooper, but he's pretty bad. He had 2.1 points last week, so he might be as bad as Cooper. He drops everything. He's got to go. Take my advice, Whalers. Get him out of the lineup. Hyde and Crowell, I think from the beginning, have been, the weak point in this Whalers team. Ezekiel Elliott has carried the rushing game, and now that he has a bye week, he'll get a taste of what it's like for the suspension that should have happened. So for the first time, I don't have to renew my objection to the suspension of Ezekiel Elliott, if you've been following the podcast, which nobody does. great pickup for Dixon. I mean, I made a bid for that guy, but Whalers blew me out of the water because they had no money left. I couldn't go get him. And Allen, if you look at his stat sheet, this guy is pretty consistent. I've watched the Ravens games. Excellent pickup right there. Yeah. So, although Whalers can muster a pretty close game, I give it to the 1603ers on this one. Again, just too stacked in his favor. I think the Whalers running game collapses on him in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I'd be at with this too. I mean, I'm certainly not, predicting any kind of blowout or anything else like that. And a loss here would be devastating at this point in the season, to me. But especially to not be able to beat the Whalers in a game where Ezekiel Elliott is out. I mean, that would be a problem. But I mean, look, there's something that I know too. I mean, Whalers. He, as long as I've known him, which maybe it's not 20 years, but it's been, 17 or something, it's been pretty damn close. He's been a competitor forever too. So, I mean, if you just, I mean, you remember how quickly he just came into the league and just started really being good right away, and then suddenly a champion. So, and this is the first time that he's really faced adversity, even in the fantasy leagues. I mean, he's been in championship games. I mean, he's a damn good team, and I'm sure he's not taking 1-4 lightly. So I just have to think that this is gonna, he's gonna do a lot. And you can still see that he's making a lot of moves. He's spending a lot of money. He's really trying to improve this team. Not trying to improve their logo, but definitely trying to improve this team. And yeah, I mean, it's a tough game, especially with the with rolling with two wide receivers from the same team. I mean, with the Beckham loss, I mean that hurts, and then having McCoy on the bench also. So actually having to do 3 players from the New England team. I mean, it's a tough game. It's a tough game, and if the only thing, look, he puts in Allen, but then he still. I mean, who does he have on the bench to? Does he have anybody? I mean, Goldman, maybe. I mean, what has Goldman been doing? I mean, but he might do something. I mean, he got 13 and 13, although he's going against Denver, but there's nobody else to throw to there. So I don't know. It's. We'll see how this one plays out, but I'm certainly going to be sweating bullets and nervous all weekend long on this game. And it's an important game for both teams.
All the pressure is clearly on you in this.
Actually, I think all the pressure is on the Whalers, but I feel a lot of pressure because I constantly put it on myself. What?
I mean, come on. With the disparity in the record, it's a game that, you're supposed to win, and if you lose, I mean, that's an upset.
Yeah, but based on the record. But I'm saying that the pressure in terms of, implications for this. Look, if I go to 4-2, hopefully I won't, but if I do, there's recovery from that. I'll probably still make the playoffs.
That's a good way to look at it. All right, yeah.
Whereas if the Whalers goes to 1-5, I don't care how good his team is or whatever else. I mean, that's some pressure right there.
He's probably juggling, like Lombardi and Eugene, they're probably juggling 4 or 5 leagues this season. I just think they're a victim of not paying attention as close as they could have.
I think that is a large factor in a lot of this stuff too. I mean, you hear even Nick talk about this stuff. He didn't even know. I mean, he's like, oh, I'm 4-1 in this league. I didn't even know. I was like,
yeah, exactly.
So I mean, they're missing out on a lot of things, by the way, because this has been one of the most exciting center leagues, let alone fantasy football, but just center leagues in general, where there's been such parity between most of the teams, with the exception of Dr. Hockey, of course.
Well, I think this season's great. I mean, on Wednesdays you have the podcast, and then you have football on Sunday, Monday, and Thursday, and then, Tuesday night late is when you start getting into, the free agent waiver wire stuff. There's almost something going on every single night.
Yeah, other than you can have your Friday and Saturday nights to yourselves, but other than that, yeah, we're pretty much occupied on most of the days. All right, what game? Well, we got to go to your game. This is the trade game. Dave's Secret Crush versus the Hackettstown Haggler. Both 3-2. Both won both games since the trade. And now we see how this happens. We see what happens.
The much ballyhooed trade game with almost both players not even playing, but I took one of them out.
Right.
So there's not even much controversy left in this one.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly going to play Le'Veon Bell. I mean, you're both 3-2 right now. Eugene is favored
125 to 102, but you've won most of your games without regard to the projections. This doesn't mean anything for the Hackettstown Hagglers.
Absolutely.
So he's picked up Roethlisberger because Russell Wilson has been on a bye. So Roethlisberger has been god awful, and he's going against the KC team. I mean, picking up my trash, and he's on the road on top of that. I mean, and you have Deshaun Watson, yes, going versus Cleveland. Clearly a huge advantage for you at the quarterback position by leaps and bounds. I'm not saying that there was any option necessarily for Eugene to do there. I mean, I guess he could have waited on picking up the other trash of Carson Palmer, but he didn't. Minor got him. But, okay. So, clear advantage there. Now you have DeAndre Hopkins going against bunches of Funches. So, he does detract some points from when Deshaun Watson, does some good things, and he mostly does it to Hopkins. He's going to steal some points there. Funches has been not bad, and he's going against Philadelphia, which does give up a lot of receiving yards. So I'm certainly going to give the edge to Eugene on this one, and maybe it counterbalances some of the Roethlisberger disadvantage. Not all the way, but I don't know. We'll see. Brandon Cooks at the Jets versus Ricardo Montalban Lewis, who you took from me in the middle of the night last night, which just...
Yeah, thanks to Yahoo taking forever to put the waivers to clear through.
I know, ridiculous. So just for everybody's information, me and Geese, traditionally on Tuesday nights, we end up, just talking, like, as we wait for the waivers to go through, and normally it goes through at, like, 3 in the morning or something?
45.
Yeah, 3:45. And it took, it was like 7 o'clock Eastern time by the time it was done. So we're just sitting there, just like scouring through just everything as we're just, just cursing Yahoo. And, we both kind of at the same time came upon Ricardo Lewis. And you picked him, right before me. I was like, where did he go? And you picked him. And we weren't like saying, oh, you should look at this guy or anything else. It was literally like, he looked at him, I looked at him, we both looked at him at the same time, and Geese just pressed the button first.
Well, you had no room because you were waiting for Yahoo, so you got screwed.
Right, I couldn't do it because I was waiting to see whether or not I got the players that I bid for. So, yeah.
So for people out there that don't really go all the way back to the center days, there was a thing called the secondary auction in the VHL. Now, once anybody who knows anything about anything, once you hear secondary auction, your ears should perk up and you should start smiling. 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning around Tuesday is secondary auction time.
Yeah.
All right, that's when all the waiver claims go through. But anybody who wasn't picked on waivers, it's easy picking for your team. You can make 4, 5, 6 moves in a row uncontested. That's how you build. That's how I got Watson. You can sit there. I'm telling you. That's the new secondary auction. So if anybody listens to this podcast, set your alarm. For Tuesdays around 4 in the morning, you'll be in on a bonanza. Just call me in Dave because the crooked connection will be up.
Yeah, though you may be waiting until 7 in the morning, depending on how long Yahoo takes to process.
You wait a little while, but you know what? Put on a pot of coffee, iron your socks, or do whatever you do, and chat it up.
But anyway, yeah. So you get Ricardo Montalban Lewis, and you go going against Houston. Basically, the only receiver in Cleveland at this point. And he's done recently. He's done well recently, and it looks like Deshaun Kaiser might not be in there. And this is the guy that because Kenny Britt is out too, Cleveland's a mess, but this is the one guy. Essentially, he's filling in the role that Corey Coleman had before the wrist injury, so this is a good pickup for you. But he's not. If everybody's going, who? You look at his numbers over the last couple of weeks. 11 and 12. He's been getting about 5 receptions each game, and that's without touchdowns, by the way. He's been getting those kind of points. So this is a good pickup. A sneaky little pickup if anybody's wondering who he is.
Don't blame them for saying who, because if I was looking at this lineup, I'd say who?
Right, exactly. But I happen to be looking at it the exact same thing, trying to replace Beckham, and so Brandon Cooks, he's been rather inconsistent. So I don't know. It depends on if he gets the points or not. I don't know, and there's a lot of mouths to feed over in New England, so we'll see if he can do anything there. Le'Veon Bell, he'll do fine against KC. Doug Martin at Arizona, I think that he'll do okay as well. Obviously, I'll give the edge to Bell there. Then Abdullah versus Tevin Coleman versus Miami. I mean, Tevin Coleman has been doing really well, even as the RB2. Other than the first week, he's had double digits every week. So.
With no touchdowns, by the way. 0.
Yeah, I know. So.
At least one.
Yeah. Amir Abdullah, been up and down. There's been some weeks where he's done really well, particularly weeks 3 and 4. I mean,
I can't wait to play against Abdullah. I have a personal grudge against that guy. I have actually never played against Abdullah. This will be interesting.
Yeah, and he's going at New Orleans, so I mean, he's been scoring. I mean, he's been one of the targets, and well, not even the targets. It's been handed off to him, and a lot of the points that Stafford has been missing out on has been because he's been taking the touchdowns right at the goal line. So, I mean, we'll see. Zach Miller, I guess you just picked him up versus Kittles and Bits, who you just picked up.
Kittles and Bits. Yep. I was going after Dixon, but Whalers just outbid me. He had more cash at that point.
Yeah. I don't know how to pick in that matchup. Whatever. And then Fitzgerald versus Tampa Bay. That's actually a good matchup for him. Versus Shane Vereen at Denver, which is not a good matchup for you. I mean, but I know what you're thinking. I know.
Again, I was going in the direction of the Giants receivers are all injured. This is going to be a huge check down game for Eli Manning. You watch.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's what you're thinking, and it very well could pan out. But I certainly would give the edge to Fitzgerald in that matchup. Looking at it on paper.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You pick up Butker, who's been the Kansas City kicker, and he's been really good. Just because the Kansas City offense has been so good as well. He's got Cano and then Philadelphia defense, and you have the Atlanta defense versus Miami. That actually is a pretty good pickup for this week. I mean, this is gonna actually. So Roethlisberger, that 19 points, wipe that off the board. He's not. He's on the road. He's not gonna do well. I mean, he's gonna get like single digits. So that knocks him down to size. So if you knock off those points there, I think Ricardo Montalban Lewis is going to surprise some people. I don't think Cooks gets the numbers. I'm gonna pick the Hagglers again in an upset win, barely squeaking this one out. I am actually.
I'm hoping for more than a squeak out, but unfortunately, I think right now in the development process it's going to be a squeaker. But I think we slightly edge out Eugene. This to me is a playoff atmosphere. Both teams are 3-2, and like you said, there's a huge difference between 4-2 and 3-3. So this is like a playoff atmosphere, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're at 4-2, then it looks like it's starting to look like you're in a good position for the playoffs. You're at 3-3, there's still a good chance to make it, but you're still fighting all the way through the rest of the season. Okay. Have we gone over all the games at this point then?
That wraps it up pretty much.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things going on this week in the league. I mean, these are really important games. A bunch of teams that are 3-2 fighting each other. I mean, this is certainly a week to watch and to see how things play out after this. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. All right. Well, I guess that's it for this week. Certainly, I'm hoping to get the Millennials and Dr. Hockey on the podcast next week after somebody emerges from that game. But one of them might be too distraught at that point to join us. But in the meantime, I want to thank Nick for joining us on the commissioners. On the commissioner cast, and certainly the current commissioner, Mr. Gazalewski. So, for Nick, for Giz, and for anybody else, Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.